It's the West Tigers podcast. Eddie Otto, we're up to episode number 81, coming off a very pleasing one-sided victory over the Broncos.
Certainly was, Joel. I thought we would score about 81 points at one stage in that first half. It was all one-way traffic at Leichhardt. It was nice to be back at the ground for the first time this year.
Yeah. Well, it would have been a very memorable night out there at Leichhardt Oval. We'll come back to that Broncos game in just a few moments' time. We'll talk a little bit of signing news that's around, or maybe it's non-news, which seems to be a continuing trend, and talk about, obviously, the game against Parramatta and some of your favourite blue and gold players. I'm sure we'll get onto that topic. But, the Broncos game, I should say I need to put a mention out there to some people who've done a very kind deed for us, NRL Universe. Eddie, I'm sure that you know their website. Got all the different pages for all the different clubs. Well, they very kindly put some links and player up for the podcast on the West Tigers page at NRL Universe. And I've got to say, it's a good website to go to if you're after just that quick glimpse of what the latest news is with the West Tigers, because they've got all the different feeds coming in from the club and from the different publications. So check it out. And big thanks again to NRL Universe. It was an interesting game, that Broncos game, wasn't it? Have you ever seen a team turn up and perform that badly before? I can't remember a worse defensive display than what the Broncos served up.
I can't remember being at a game seeing an opposition play that badly. I've probably, over the last 20 years, been at games where the Tigers might have been that bad, Joel. But, look, it's all we've heard about the last 3 or 4 days is how bad they're going. And I think that's fair enough, considering just some of the things I saw out there. Even their full reserves, Joel, who weren't playing, they're 18 to 21. I remember doing a lap of Leichhardt halfway through the game, and they were sort of all joking around, laughing, and the score was 30-0, and I thought, that's not a good look. And then I saw, after the game footage, it was about 15 minutes after the game, they panned into their dressing room, and there were about 6 or 7 of them that were all buried in their mobile phones. I just thought that was just such a poor look for the Broncos.
We, and I probably should raise my hand a little bit, we're a little bit critical of some of the team selections. I didn't think Chris Lawrence was going to play in the centres. We were a bit worried about the bench last week. But again, it's hard to take a lot out of the Broncos game because it was a little bit more than just a training run. But I've got to say, Russell Packer, we both have to put our hands up and say we're a bit wrong about Russell. He had a very good game.
He did. He led from the front, which is what he was brought to do, Joel, as an aggressive forward, and we're certainly going to need that. If we're going to beat some of these better teams in the second half of the competition, a fit and firing Russell Packer would be in our best 17. We just haven't seen it for the past couple of years. But even though the Broncos were that bad, Joel, I think there's still a number of positives from that game. I think that's 6 weeks in a row now we've kept teams below 20. And that was the first time since 2012 we'd held opposition scoreless. So, in that 6-week batch, we've played Penrith, South and Canberra. So they're 3 pretty good attacking sides. So I think there's definitely been a consistency about the performance in the last 6 weeks.
Yeah, definitely. And just back to Russell Packer, and we've spoken about it before, about that lack of a forward leader that we seem to have been exposed in a few games. So I think if Russell Packer can stay fit and firing and focused, the 3 Fs, I think that he could be the difference between finishing 8th and finishing 10th or 11th.
Yeah, you could be right. He's fresh, and we got some information there a couple of months ago that we were sort of always speculating that he had fallen out with the coach, and there wasn't a lot of information coming out of the club, but it seems like that he had a foot injury, which they really struggled to get a handle on. And he hasn't been able to train, and now he's been able to do training. And that would make a massive difference to a footballer if you're able to train during the week leading into a game.
Yeah, absolutely. You've introduced another 2 F words into the Russell Packer vernacular there. It's foot and focus. So good job. It's the 5 Fs.
Yeah, we'll leave it at that, Joel.
Obviously, a lot of talk around the halves. I thought Billy Walters played really well, and Benji, to his credit, he performed admirably. But again, there has to be, and I know I'm a hard taskmaster, but there has to be an asterisk next to the performance because the Broncos were woeful.
Yeah, I don't know if asterisk is the right word, but I suppose you mean, it's not exactly a great preparation for the Parramatta game on Thursday, is it? We really don't know if that sort of, it's like going from under 18 sort of opposition to a team that's running first on the ladder in the NRL. So, I haven't seen 2 or 3 tries. The opening 3 tries, they were really, really soft. But like you said, the halves, Benji controlled the game. That's what we wanted him to do as a halfback. He was able to get his hands on the ball and really be the lone sort of voice, which tends to work for some teams, having one dominant voice and one guy like Billy Walters who's prepared to, play to his strengths, which is sort of run the ball and maybe create a couple of passes wide. And I quite enjoyed Billy Walters' performance. I've got some pretty high hopes for him over the next couple of years, Joel. Obviously, with Benji and Reynolds in a bit of a state of flux there, what they're going to do, and his combination with Harry Grant. Remember, he played together with Harry Grant at Sunshine Coast Falcons. So, there's no way he doesn't deserve to be starting this week.
Yeah, you're right. I think that to give the Tigers full credit, as badly as the Broncos were performing, what I liked most about that game, it had really nothing to do with the tries. It had to do with what happened in, I think it was the 61st minute. And we kicked the ball down the Broncos' end. We were leading 36-0, I think, at the time. And we wouldn't let them get across the 20-metre line. That is, and we've spoken about that before, about the Roosters, how they do that in those moments. They just don't give you an inch. And that's the thing that stands out for me from the game, was that commitment in defence when they had the Broncos on the ropes and they just kept pummeling them.
Yeah, and you could see it from the very, the first 5 or 6 minutes, Joel, even though it was 0-0, the Broncos were only making 10 or 15 metres a set. So our intent and our energy was there from the start, which is something, a hallmark of Michael Maguire's teams that we perhaps didn't see as consistently last year. I know the wins and losses are tracking similar to the last couple of years, but I think there's some more solid foundations being built in terms of style of game and consistency in defence and performance.
Yeah, you can see some steps being made, and there may be a step back. We've probably seen a couple of times a step back, but then it's generally 2 steps forward. So but I think there is definitely some progress being made, which is great to see, and that's what keeps you interested. That's what keeps you coming back every week. We have to single out Luciano Leilua. I thought he was fantastic, and we've spoken about obviously Ryan Madison a couple of weeks ago. We wouldn't have Luciano Leilua if Ryan Madison had stayed, but I don't think we've lost a lot. I think Luciano's doing sensationally well. Yeah,
he is. They're different styles of players, but he is a totally different player to what he was at the Dragons. He was an impact player. He could play 50 minutes maybe at best. He certainly wasn't as fit, but he's not only an 80-minute player, Joel, but he strikes me as one of the leaders in this team. He's very vocal. He's got an infectious sort of personality. I think they all tend to love. I don't know if you saw the song after the game, but he was sort of the one woofing and hollering and whatever in there. But it's great to see, because I've watched some of those songs the last couple of years and I've thought, geez, they're nice and quiet compared to some other sort of teams. I know some teams carry on a bit, but sort of like to see a few guys that are really getting stuck in. And he was great. He's been great all year. And I thought another guy who's been really good all year is Josh Alloway. He ran for over 200 metres, Joel, and every single one of his runs had so much aggression and purpose about it. I thought he was excellent.
Yeah, definitely. He's and that's the thing, is that he has gone to a next level, which is fantastic to see. If you can then add Russell Packer, if we can get Alex Twile back on the field and Zane Musgrove back on the field, then I think we're laying the platform. If these guys can come into the team as we get to this harder run, then things might be falling our way potentially to make the 8.
Yeah, it's a tough run home. That's one of the things that really irks me about this NRL draw. And I suppose it is luck of the draw, but I look at the ladder now, Joel, and we're 7th. We've been in the 8, I think, for last probably most of the season. Cronulla are 9th, Joel, and I think we're a better team than Cronulla. I think personally we're in the top 8 teams in the competition this year, but they play, I think it's the Warriors, the Titans, the Bulldogs, and maybe the Broncos all twice. That's a huge difference. It's a huge leg up, because there's 5 or 6 really bad teams in the competition this year. And we only play the Warriors, Titans, Broncos, Cowboys, and Dragons once. So that's 5 of the 6 bottom teams we only play once. We play the Bulldogs twice. I know you've got to beat the best teams, and Madge certainly would be saying that, but I just get frustrated when I see the Sharks have got the easiest draw on paper in the competition. We've got the hardest, and that could be the difference between coming 8th and 9th, because I think we're a better team.
Yeah, and the bigger picture of that is when you think about it and you completely take off your, if you step aside of the game and you look at it from a non-caring perspective, and somebody said to you, I really love this game of rugby league and I've got this team called the Tigers and we play some teams once and some teams twice and other teams play one time. People would, from outside the fishbowl, would say that's insane. That's not fair. It needs to be either play everybody once or everybody twice.
Yeah, and there's very little sort of discussion in it. I know in the AFL, like that's a huge discussion at the starting point of the year is which 6 or 8 teams do you play twice? Because that could be the difference between 3 or 4 wins, especially in such a lopsided. This is not an even competition this year. There are some really good teams. There are some really, really bad teams, and there are 4 or 5 in the middle, like us. And if you've got a draw like us compared to Cronulla, it's a massive disadvantage. So that's frustrating. But in terms of our development, playing better teams is going to help.
Yeah.
But I think it still could end in heartbreak this year because of that awful run home we've got.
When you look at the table, not to get too sidetracked away from the Tigers, but I mean, is that your salary cap at work? I mean, the haves and the have-nots is so huge at the moment.
Yes and no. I think, some of those clubs have got to look at themselves and say they've shot themselves in the foot. Like Canterbury spent a lot of money last 5 years and did it poorly. North Queensland got a talented roster and are playing awful. So, yes, I don't think the salary cap is by any ways perfect. I think it worked a lot better, 10, 15, 20 years ago when all the sort of TPAs and third parties weren't a part of it. But I think some clubs would be maybe, clinging on to that as an excuse for their poor displays.
Okay, anything else to add about that Broncos game other than it was just so nice to sit there and just it wasn't, and even though we dominated and even though it was a shellacking, it was an 80-minute performance. Whereas the Tigers of the past, it would have been 32-12 or 32-36 or,
Well, that's the thing, Joel, and I read that some of the forum after the game, and that's what we've asked the last 2 years, is when you play a really bad team, be ruthless. Beat them in the first 20 minutes, put your foot down and don't let it off. And that's the thing, it was 30-0 at half-time and there was no letting off. I think that's 3 or 4, scoreless seconds half we've had for the opposition. So, yeah, just nice to beat Brisbane, Joel. I'm really enjoying their struggles this year.
Yeah, it's funny to see, isn't it? And it took me back to, as a fan, the first ever flogging that I experienced as a Tigers fan was in 1993 at the hands of Brisbane. And, I'd come from the Tigers being a semi-final team every year, and then the wheels really fell off in 93, and we went up to Brisbane ANZ Stadium up there and got beaten 52-0. And I'll always remember that. And it's sort of funny now to see it all reversed a fair amount. So I don't have too much sympathy for the Broncos, but I'm sure they'll get back on their feet sooner or later. There's not a huge amount of signing news around. There's a little bit of talk around, but nothing really concrete. But one thing that did give us all a bit of hope, the Pom, who's normally got some pretty good mail, he posted on the West Tigers forum that we're in the line for maybe 2 or 3 signings. Centre, wing, and second row apparently being the areas the club is most looking at. I think we'd probably most agree on that.
Yeah, that sounds around about the mark. A little bit of chat the last couple of weeks about Corey Hawira-Naira, but I think a few clubs will be in for him. It'd be interesting to see what happens with someone like Jack de Belin if he's cleared to play. He'll be a highly sought-after player. Not too many superstars coming off the market next year, Joel. I saw that on NRL 360 last night. They reckon, David Fafita is the biggest star who's off contract, and he's probably about to sign with Brisbane on the Gold Coast. So maybe next year might not be a big fish, but if we can add 2 or 3 quality players like I think we did this year, then you're going to start to get towards that top 5, top 6 roster that we need to play finals consistently.
I've got 3 hard questions for you. Would you like them one after the other, or would you like to have them all at once?
No, let's have them all at once, because I got one question to ask you that I asked last week, and I'm going to get you to answer it again.
All right. Jack Bird, should the Tigers buy Jack Bird if he's available at a reasonable amount of money? That's question one. Sonny Bill Williams, potentially available from the Toronto Wolfpack for the rest of the year. Should we buy Sonny Bill Williams? And 3, should Benji Marshall play on in 2021? They're hard questions.
Okay. Yeah, Jack Bird. I don't think so, Joel. I just think, 2 knee injuries, a few issues up there in Brisbane. He would come at a cut price sort of deal, and he was a very good footballer at Cronulla.
Mm-hmm.
He's still young, so yeah, it would have to be price dependent, Joel. If you said you could get him for 2 years for $300,000 a year, you'd probably say it's a no risk, situation. We need a centre.
Yep.
Does he want to play centre though? He went to Brisbane to play fullback, so no, I wouldn't. I'll back down a bit on that. I'd say price dependent. Sonny Bill Williams, no. I think he's signed off, Joel. He'd look good in a Roosters side or something like that, but I don't know. He's playing for Toronto. What was he getting? 10 million or something? I watched a couple of games and he didn't look like he was interested. I think 6 years is a long time to be out of the NRL. He's a great athlete though. So Benji Marshall, no. Let's go out on a high, Benji. You're back in the team, playing pretty well, but yeah, I think this has got to be his last year, Benji. How about answer your own questions quickly?
Yeah, I agree with Jack Bird. If you can get Jack Bird on the right amount of money, I think he's worth it. I think he's worth taking a gamble on because he is such a talented player.
Yep.
But the injuries are a massive issue, of course. Sonny Bill Williams, I think he would bring a huge amount of publicity to the club, and if we could get him for again the right amount of money that didn't block another player's development, then why not? Why not? Maybe we need an X factor just to bring things on. And no, Benji shouldn't play on next year. It's Jonathan Thurston, champion player, went 1 season too many. Benji, don't risk it.
I agree with that. And yeah, Sonny Bill, you saw what he brought to the Roosters 6 years ago and what he's done in rugby. And even just like a guy like that, they talked about his aura and his presence and how he can uplift everyone around the club and his professionalism. So if you could get him for half a season or something, it'd be great. I think he'd probably go back to the Roosters or go to somewhere like that. But who knows? But I've got a question for you, Joel. I asked the same question last week. I said, would you offer Harry Grant 800,000 or 900,000 for 3 or 4 years? Have you changed your mind on that?
Well, as Harry Grant is next on the list to discuss, there is some talk that we're going to extend the deal with Melbourne for another year. I reckon 1,000 is a lot of money.
I know, Joel, but I just think you're not going to get many players in key positions. Like I said, there's no superstars off contract.
Yeah,
this is a key position player, and I just think he's one of the surest bets in the game. There's not many. You go back to 19, 20-year-olds, and there are not many sure bets. But he comes in with a really good character and a body ready for NRL, and I just think he ticks so many boxes. And the Harry chance at Leichhardt, that's hopefully just tugging at his heartstrings just a little bit.
Well, apparently he likes surfing, so there's not a great deal of surfing in Melbourne. So things like that can play an influence on a young man. I think that if I can put it, all right, I'll give him 800,000, but there's one disclaimer there. Josh Reynolds has to be wearing someone else's colours in 2021. I mean, we just, we have to have the roster needs to be a little bit more, malleable and not quite as top heavy as it is with guys like Josh Reynolds to fit a Harry Grant in there. But if he's willing to make a long-term commitment, well, why not?
Well, I'd snap their hand off right now if they just offered him 1 more year at the Tigers.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think next year we can be an even better side and really be a proper side. Whereas this year we're still on the fringe, and if Melbourne they have every right to take him back, and they 99% chance they will get him back, Joel, next year or the year after. But 1 more year, I'd say let's snap their hand off and let's try and do it.
Mm.
And then he is off contract, so there's nothing stopping any club putting in a huge offer. And like you said, he's going to his price and his demand is going through the roof, and we've got a little leg up there on at least 14 other clubs.
Yeah, exactly. And there is a little bit of talk, of course, that Melbourne, they're losing both wingers, of course, and Paul Momorowski is fitting into the system quite well by all reports. So, that could be a factor as well. They do get a good backline player in Momorowski. Some people will disagree, but I still would very, very, very much like Josh Adokar back at West Tigers.
Yeah, I'm with you there. That's one thing we're still lacking is speed. If we can get some speed. You said back row, centre, front row. I'd say yes, but speed's got to be the priority for next year.
Yeah, definitely. And I'd like to put a caveat in. Once again, really impressed with Tommy Tower, and I can see Tommy moving into the centres next year. So maybe a centre isn't really required at this stage. If we could recruit a Josh Adokar, then there's your problem solved there.
That sounds good to me. I think he's more a centre than a winger. Tommy, he's going to be a big boy.
All right, shall we move on to the Eels?
Let's do it.
Okay. And are you going to be going to Bankwest Stadium?
Is it a Parramatta home game? I don't know. I have to check my emails, Joel, if it's we're allowed to go. Maybe we are. There was general admission sort of tickets on sale at Leichhardt, even though I'm a member.
Yeah.
I haven't made my mind up. But it's going to be a bit old school. This, Joel, has been a build up towards this game. I like that. I think that's what rugby league was built on 15 or 20 years ago. It's a bit of spite between the two clubs, a bit of back and forth. Everyone's afraid to say something these days, so I think it's good.
Obviously, the Eels they lost last week, didn't they?
And, as predicted, Joel.
As predicted by yourself. Have they got that loss out of the way? As we have said before, I don't see a fully rounded. I see a good team there, but I don't see a fully rounded team. When I compare teams that are generally the premiership threats and the really good teams, I don't think they're quite at that level. But in saying that, they've certainly had the wood on us. Well, they did in that big win last year. They've got a bit more speed, they've got a bit more strike, and they've got plenty of power up front. So it's certainly going to be a big test.
Well, let's be honest. They've got a better side on paper than we do. They're a year or two further down the line, and they've had Brad Arthur there for the best part of 5 years. So that's a blueprint for what we can do with Michael Maguire. I think Michael Maguire is probably a better coach than Brad Arthur, not discounting the job he's done. But yeah, you look at that Parramatta side tomorrow, Joel, and it is a good side on paper if they all run out. And they do have more speed. They've got a blockbusting winger. It'd be interesting to pack, because that's where I want to really see our pack stand up against a big, strong pack. Campbell Gillard's in great form. Madison's been playing well for them. Nathan Brown, these guys. So that's going to be the big test. If we can match them in the forwards, then we're a chance in this game. I'm not overly confident, but disappointing we didn't get Alex Twile back for the game.
Yeah, I was disappointed by that. I was also disappointed by the selection of Michael Cheekham in the second row. But I've said it the last couple of weeks, but I think there's some ducks and drakes going on. I don't know if Michael Cheekham started in the second row.
I don't think Madge hasn't been playing too many ducks and drakes with his teams, but I was just surprised at Michael Cheekham. I don't know what he's deserved, unless he trained the house down, Joel, because there's no reserve grade, but he's just, it might sound a bit harsh, but he's just not a player I trust at the moment. Getting to trust a lot of these players with consistent performances, and that's not something I can say about Michael Cheekham. Even that little stint he had against Penrith, he managed to miss a flimsy tackle in the middle, which lost us the game. So, he's got a fair bit to prove there. I would have thought, I can't think off the top of my head, but I thought maybe you move Chris Lawrence to the back row, or maybe you bring, maybe not McQueen, but Elijah Taylor in to that side. But that's a potential point that Parramatta will be looking to exploit.
Well, Elijah Taylor named on the extended bench, as somebody said on the forum. This would have been a perfect opportunity to run Elijah Taylor in that position and just have Elijah targeting the Parramatta kickers, which he does really well. Personally, I would have put Sam McIntyre there. I've been really impressed by Sam McIntyre off the bench. And I know we'd lose a little bit of thrust off the bench. But I think Sam was up to a first-grade starting spot. Yeah, I think that I would have gone with Sam and Finney.
Yeah, I think so. I think he's been the best of our bench players this year, and I include, Thomas McKaylee in that. I think he's sort of plateaued a little bit so far this year, and McIntyre's brought that aggression. He's tackled well. Whether he's up to starting, I suppose we never know. But I think he's more in the long-term plans than Michael Cheekan for me.
Yeah. I guess probably without going further into detail with the game, I mean, we know that where Parramatta is on the table, we know where we are, but I know that we've done well against teams that are above us. I don't think, generally, the Canberra, the Penrith game comes to mind. Of course, Canberra was a slightly higher spot when we played them. I'm pretty confident, or more confident than I was, going into this corresponding game last year. I think that if we can come with that attitude, we should be able to frustrate them. If we can just frustrate them and just stay on top of them and sort of there might be the opportunity to grind out a win.
Yeah, you still use those words though, like frustrate and grind, and that's sort of what we have to do to beat a better side. I'd like to come out and blow a better side off the paddock with good football, and we've actually scored a lot of points this year, Joel. But against Canberra, Penrith, and South, the good teams, we haven't looked that great in attack.
Yeah.
Like I said, there's a huge difference between playing a good defensive side and a poor one. So even though our attack points-wise looks good, it's still unproven against good sides. They look like on paper they got more points in them than us. Eventually we have to, I'll put it in a tennis term, Joel, eventually we have to break serve. We're sort of holding serve. We're beating most of the bad teams.
Yep.
We're having honourable defeats against the good teams. Eventually we're going to have to beat a good team to make this sort of top 8 this year.
Yeah, and I think we need to beat a good team to overcome the loss against the Gold Coast as well. We need to win one of these games, at least one of these games, to get back onto that level playing ground.
Exactly right. That game still looms large as one that could haunt us at the end of the year.
Yeah, definitely. Now, as a West Tigers fan, are you prepared for if we do not come up and score more points than Parramatta, that there's going to be a bit of gloating and carrying on from a few of our favourite players at Parramatta?
Well, not really, Joel. I mean, I've seen it all before. You'd like to think guys like that would show a little bit of class to teams that gave him an opportunity and not rub it in like our ex-coach sort of did. I think he showed a lack of class, but, would I be confident of that if they beat us? No. But the only way to shut them up, Joel, is to finish with more points on the scoreboard. That's the best way to do it. We can talk about wanting to see Ryan Madison get taken out of the game and Mitchell Moses coat hanging. I'm sure deep down everyone's thinking that as a Tigers fan. Let's be honest. But the best way to do it is to beat them on the scoreboard.
Yeah, absolutely. That is 100% correct. All right, well, we'll leave it there and enjoy the game, Eddie, and good luck to the Tigers. What's
your prediction, Joel? Have you got to tip an upset, or you think Parramatta will do it?
I'm tipping a golden point match. I think it's going to be quite tough. Yeah.
We don't need that.
Not particularly high scoring.
Yeah, I think I'm just a bit worried that Parramatta lost last week and they got a full-strength team and we got some injuries. So I think I'm going to go 22-16 Para, but praying I'm wrong.
All right. I'm going Tigers 13, Parramatta 12.
Sounds good to me.
All right. See you, Eddie.
Thanks, Joel. See you later.